Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Locke and Key Season 3, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, obviously we're picking up with that through line about how Bodhi feels about the whole Josh and his mom thing, because he's assuming, like, right, mom's going to end up forgetting about dad, and, you know, Kinsey tries to tell him otherwise, but obviously he's young, and he misses his dad, I mean, especially because he wanted to use the time shift key to go see his dad, and, you know, now for him, and he even yells at, I want to say, it might have even been Nina, he had yelled at about how the fact is everyone's moving on so fast. You know, it's just like, right, we're just kind of forgetting dad. Because at the very least, it's like, right, we were kind of on the same page. And even if we're moving forward, at least in his mind, it's like, we're not moving on from dad. His mom dating someone else is that. At the very least, like I said, Kinsey kind of went through her feelings of it last season. But it's also the thing of like, right, mom deserves to be happy too. But it's a lot for someone as young as Bodhi to really kind of handle that. So he wants to see his dad, and so Nina, right. Instead of using the time shift key, because she heard from Duncan, I don't think she heard how it operates, but knows, like, right, it's kind of dangerous because it's time travel, so probably don't want to fiddle with that too much. But she's like, right, there's a safer way to go about it, so she uses the head key to go inside of her head, and there's a camping memory they have. And then Nina sees herself pouring a drink, and she immediately removes Bodhi from the situation. He's like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And he immediately interprets it as like, "Oh, you didn't even want to let the memory finish. You don't want to remember dad." And she's like, "That's not it." He didn't want to give her a chance to explain, understandably, because Bodhi, once again, because he's so young, Nina never was drinking around him, because she did, because he was fairly young at the time. But at least Tyler and Kinsey are old enough, because she had to sit down with them, and maybe Bodhi was there too, but maybe he's so young he doesn't remember. He doesn't realize, like, her complicated history. I don't think he knows, like, his mom's struggles, you know. And she didn't want Bodhi to see that side, because I immediately thought, like, oh man, she must have done something bad, and Bodhi was just kind of like got hurt or something, and it's because she was drunk and wasn't with all her faculties. And I thought that's what it was. But she does go back to that memory later. I always see her sort of tickling Bodhi, but then immediately she kind of jumps to a new memory, which I'm like, at first I was like, oh, because she's drunk and so she doesn't remember everything. Could that be what? Could it be like she kind of blacked out? So is that why, like, because the hangover, I think, is from that, because I think the next day or whatever was supposed to be Kinsey's play, and she didn't show up because she overslept. They tried to wake her up, but they couldn't. And I think that's such a heartbreaking thing with Nina. I mean, obviously, like, she's had her struggles with it even over the course of the show, because Kinsey and Tyler immediately recognized the signs back in season 1 when she started drinking again. And now, and you could tell Kinsey was worried to the point she was looking through her mom's stuff. You know, and Bodhi was like, "What are you looking for?" And she's like, "What are you looking for?" He's looking for a time shift key, but she's not in a position to tell her brother, like, "Yo, I'm looking for alcohol to make sure mom's not drinking." It's like, right, they're trying to protect him from the ugliness of it. Yes, he was around when she was drinking at points, but he doesn't remember. Like, he probably just thought, like, oh, mom acts weird sometimes. Like, he doesn't think too much of it. He probably doesn't even really remember it. And that's the heartbreaking thing for Nina, too, is like, for her, she remembers every memory a certain way, and now you kind of see the ugly truth of them, where she's like, oh, I remember things a certain way. Now she looks at him like, oh, I was drinking then. You know, it's like, oh, when they're building, like, those gingerbread houses, and she kind of messed it up and ended up pouring, like, alcohol on a younger Kinsey. It's just by accident, but it's just, you know, she was so disappointed in herself, and just looking at it, it's just, because she's drowning herself in her own regrets. I even love that line from Kinsey. It's like, you haven't even taken a sip of alcohol, yet you're already like, you found another way to relapse. Because it's just like she's drowning her own sorrows in this, and just, it's like almost relapsing again, but it's just like she can't break herself away from this, because it's just, because sinking into her drinks, it's just like her sinking into these memories of her being drunk and drinking, and just, because it made her realize, like, all these memories, like, I saw them one way, like, but Kinsey tried to, like, make her feel better. No, like, there were good times, but it's like, yeah, but there's too many times I was drunk, and, you know, it's heartbreaking. I thought was beautiful. Well, it's sad because she wanted to stay. She's just like, I got to work through this on my own. Kinsey wanted to be there for her, but it's like, right, you kind of can't help everyone through this. You got to let them kind of go through it themselves. So Nina ended up having that memory of Rendell, because it was like after she had sat the kids down. Once again, Bodhi might have been there, but maybe he was too young to really understand, or maybe they decided not to have that conversation when Bodhi was around. But Kinsey and Tyler are well enough aware of their mom's alcoholism, so that's why they immediately recognized the sign, or at least Tyler did, because then when they noticed like the mint toothpaste she was using, that was their telltale sign of like, oh, mom's drinking again. Like, they were completely aware of it, but Bodhi didn't really realize anything was off, because even then they were still keeping it from him, I think. But Rendell telling her that she has to kind of forgive herself. Now, there's also the context of knowing what Rendell and everyone else went through in their past. It's understandable why he would kind of say that. And the sad thing is, who knows if Rendell ever... Well, he said it's the only way to kind of move forward is to kind of find some way to forgive yourself. That's kind of the only way you can take that step forward. Because her, like, self-hatred of herself is kind of like sending her spiraling anymore, because she feels like a failure, like, you know, as a person, as a mom, because it's just like, I can't believe, you know, I mean, everyone has their struggles, everyone has their demons. It takes a lot to be able to face them. So, and making a promise to her kids that she's going to fight this, and she did for many, many years, you know, because season 1 was her first relapse in God knows how long. But in that moment, that's what she needed to hear, you know. Bodhi up here saying that obviously that she's forgotten so much about, she's ready to move on from Rendell. It's like, no, his words and what he said meant so much to her, and it gave her, like, having that context now gave her the strength to move forward. And once again, I think now knowing the truth about the keys, she knows everything that Rendell was holding on to. So I think there's, like I said, even more weight to those words, because she knows like what he was trying to forgive himself for, you know, which are interesting parallels with the whole Kinsey thing, what she was up to this episode, but we'll get to that soon enough. Well, let's jump to Kinsey really quickly. Kinsey did, well, she found Edith's body, not Edith, Eden's body at the bottom of the well, and obviously, like, she brings the Savinis into it, so it's like, well, how long has she been there? And Doug's all about leaving her down there, because it's like, oh, kind of a more, like, appropriate place to, like, bury her. And then, like, Zadie's just kind of like, oh, we can dump some acid down there. Everyone's looking at her like, yeah. I'm like, this ain't Breaking Bad, Zadie. But it's like, yeah, we got to dispose of the body. Because they had talked about, I want to say in episode 1 or 2, they talked about Eden still being missing, and that there's, like, a missing persons report for her. Obviously, they know, like, well, if you found Eden, it wouldn't be Eden. So they just assumed she was still out there in the wild. But they also piece it together, like, there's no way Eden fell down that well. Someone pushed her. Obviously, they don't have all the clues, but they're piecing it together. And they even had like this, you know, we got, you know, despite everything. And I thought it is sad, because also, like, notice who didn't say anything? Abby, because Abby didn't really know Eden that well, because by the time Abby came into the picture, Eden was already demonified. But each one of them kind of gave their like kind of farewell to her. That I thought was actually really beautiful. What Kinsey said, because Kinsey was saying that basically she could have rejected us and turned away from us the moment like the nightmare from my fear from my head attacked her, but she didn't. She helped us out, and you know, and she had to pay the price for it. Like, her and Kinsey never had a chance to become friends, and they were on their way there if she hadn't gotten demonified, if she hadn't gotten possessed, you know. And it's like, right, it is that sad thing of like, right, the people closest to us, they get mixed up in this. Those who choose to fight with us and be by our side end up paying the biggest price. Whether it's everyone that died at the end of season 2, whether it's Jackie, whether it's Eden, like, everyone paying that price. I loved, what they were making a point about the fact is that Eden would be, basically, she'd be happy with knowing that she'd be perpetually stuck as beautiful, because she was just, like, frozen and stuff like that. And I want to say it was Doug that said, like, oh, she always had chic hair or something like that, and everyone looked at him, he was like, what? I was like, honestly, Doug, I think Eden would really appreciate that. She would have loved hearing that. I think that would have actually been the biggest compliment, so... it is interesting how everything kind of comes full circle in a very similar regard. Just like the four, Aaron, Rendell, Ellie, and the other dude had to dispose of their friends' bodies. They're doing the same thing. Eventually, Eden's body will probably wash up and at least close that case if her body's found. It will happen just like those kids. And it was just, assume they drowned. So same thing is going to be applicable in this case. So just kind of another thing that, well, luckily she had the other Savinis there to kind of balance it out, but she hasn't really had an opportunity because her mom was kind of dealing with what she was dealing with, so Kinsey didn't want to kind of didn't have an opportunity to kind of talk to her about it. You had Tyler hanging out with Logan, which they didn't make a point of it. I guess Logan knows just to dodge it, or either he doesn't remember about magic, but him and Tyler are hanging out again, and it's just kind of like, it's also got to be interesting and complicated too, because like Logan is also kind of probably like a reminder about Jackie too, but it obviously gets like a text from Carly and stuff like that, and so it's like, right, he's stuck, the in-between, as in between Montana and Matheson, and it's like having to decide, everyone's kind of making those decisions, whether it's to move forward or not. And he likes Carly. He's like, yeah, but we're just friends. But he's also like, yeah, but I don't think I'm ready. So I thought that was interesting. And I love when he was hanging out with Josh, which, yeah, he's kind of dating my mom, so that's kind of weird. And obviously he's a former teacher, so that's all of that makes it weird. But I love that when they were talking about Matheson stuff, he started reciting stuff, and I was like, what was it? I was like, oh my god, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, the books, he, like in season 1, when he was trying to impress Jackie, he threw a whole bunch of books. No, I can't remember if that was just to impress Jackie, or was that just to test it out. But they used the head key. If you basically take any book and you toss it inside your head after using the head key, you remember every all that knowledge is there. So like, because he almost spaces out when he like recites all that knowledge. It's because he's like, yeah, sometimes I just randomly know odd facts about Mathis, and I was like, that's a nice way to kind of bring that full circle. And he's like, yeah, you might not remember the keys, but that's one of the keys where the effects kind of stay with you. It didn't undo those. It didn't remove those books from your mind. So I was like, I thought that's kind of a nice little thing to kind of bring that full circle again. And it's like, once again, it's like it's a small, it's them testing out the power of the keys and stuff, but it's like, it's such a small thing to kind of bring back a little bit in this moment. But hanging out with Josh, Tyler recognizes the emblem on one of the soldier uniforms, and it's like, well, what does that mean? It's like, it's usually reserved for captains. It's like, well, why would the guy who broke into our house have one of these? Which also was like, Tyler didn't think too much of it, because he was like, oh, well, Mom probably didn't tell you because, he probably didn't tell you about it because they didn't steal anything. But even then, it's kind of like, it didn't raise any flags then. I think it's not until later on when he tried to go to the police, because he's like, right, I have something that's identifiable, something you can identify, Jesus, that could point them in the right direction. And it's like, oh, finds out Kinsey lied. And he's asking Kinsey, well, why did you do that? Like, she's like, I can't tell you. He's like, why? Is it, oh, did you want to just push me? Do you want me to leave? And she's like, no, that's like the last thing I knew. And he's like, then tell me the truth. Be honest with me. But she can't. This is what he wanted. And I mean, Tyler probably never thought that things would be this complicated. I mean, maybe that's also why, on some small level, maybe that's also like some part of him knows like to stay away from home. Because, I mean, it's mainly because of the Jackie thing, but there's still, the fact is that, yeah, like, just where Nina was for the first 2 seasons with the kids, that's kind of where Tyler is with the rest of his family now, because he's kind of the outsider, because he doesn't remember the keys. And that's that's the sad thing, because Kinsey wants to respect her brother's choice, and her mom talks to her about it. It's like, yeah, we have to respect his choice. She's like, obviously it's hard for you because Tyler's always been the one to protect you. She's like, look at this as a situation where now you get to protect him, protect him from like the painful memories of everything associated with the key. He wanted to kind of leave it behind. We have to respect that, because last episode Kinsey was kind of all about like, no, let's kind of who cares? Like, Bodhi was about that, and Kinsey wanted to try to be the more mature person, being like, no, I'm going to respect my brother's choices, but she needs his help. Like, she can't fully lean on her brother when the time comes. She can't share everything with her brother. Like I said, they had their issues, especially after everything with Sam, but they did grow so much closer over the course of the series. So to have that person you can rely on the most be the person you can't rely on now is a tough adjustment. Other than that, we catch up with Gideon and his men for a little bit as they go and retrieve their weapons. It's like, cool, not only are you have superhuman strength, now you're armed, and you're also all unkillable. Well, Gideon's killable. The other two aren't, so they're definitely going to be very good cannon fodder. But, like, yeah, he's superhuman, and obviously, as we can see, they could still die in those human bodies. It probably would just take a little bit more, and it would be hard to do, but yeah. I'd also forgot to talk about it, too. Bodhi did find they said the things, the chest name in this, too, and I'm blanking on it. I thought that was kind of a nice reveal where it's like, right, it's embedded in the card, and then, like, it goes from 2D to 3D when he pops it up. I was like, oh, I love that. I love how, like, the keys operate in that regard, but other than getting armed, and obviously with them being armed, I mean, they were willing to kill anyone that was in their way to get to their weapons. I mean, who's to say, like, anyone else won't still get in their way and they have to end up killing? We'll see where things kind of go from there. They've at least dropped one body, scalped one body this episode, so. But other than that, we have the whole ending segment where Bodhi, not listening to Kinsey being like, don't do anything stupid or dangerous. Understandably, just wants to see his dad. He has the opportunity, and he uses the time shift key, which sadly, he's using a key that he does not know how to control or how it works. Even Duncan told him, like, it's super dangerous. Tries to go see his dad, but he ends up going back to the events of season 2, which we see this scene in the trailer. I want to say it was like episode 7 or 8 when they were trying to trap Gabe. And Bodhi shows up and everyone's like, wait, what the hell? And immediately Duncan's like, you found the time shift key, which I'm like, hey, a little more Duncan and a little Scott, which I thought was pretty dope. He's like, because he's trying to figure it out because he's like, oh, it's time travel. So, like, doesn't that mean all this is in danger? And then Duncan says, that's not how this key works. Once again, it jumps, like I brought it up last episode, I think this solidifies it even more. It is like a yo-yo thing. You can pop into a moment of time for a certain amount of time, but you will, when it's all said and done, you will pop back to your original time. But as we saw at the end of the episode, if something or someone is latched onto you, it can pop back with you as well. So, for example, like if Bodhi took something from the past, he could take it with him. But once again, then you get into the timey-wiminess of it all, like, does that mean that time still happened the way it did? So does that create a paradox, or is it just kind of like, okay, jumping ahead, when Dodge is here, present day, does that mean that basically the key kind of corrects itself, like basically like a copy of Dodge came to this time and everything else basically it's like, oh, any gap, it immediately gets reset the moment the time shift key is over. It's like a pocket of time of like, once the sands run out and everything resets, boom, you're back to everything in that particular time frame that you jumped to resets. That seems to be continue from what I said last episode. It seems like that's how that works. And I kind of figured as much because of the whole Dodge thing. I actually thought when Dodge was like, oh, thanks for the ride, I thought that would have been the end of the episode, and the episode kept going. I was like, oh, wow, you're about to resolve this in this episode? It's like, oh, no, we're just using this time, these couple minutes left just to make things so much worse. So I was like, oh, God. And then Bodhi pretends to use the ghost key, and I was like, oh, pretty slick of you. But then she saw him, throws him out, and I was like, oh boy. And then she started chasing him as a ghost, and I was like, oh, okay. And then she went back, I was like, what was the point? Oh god, you're gonna she possesses Bodhi's body. It's actually interesting because like Sam and Dodge / Gabe / Lucas went through the same rigmarole last season, but Sam kind of ended up on the other side, which is probably going to end up happening that Bodhi's probably going to end up running into Sam because he's still out there as a spirit. So, and probably can also talk to Chamberlain, but it's like, cool, Dodge is in your body. What she'll most likely do is hide their body somewhere else. And now it's like, cool. That sucks. Oh, you kind of really severely screwed the pooch on this, Bodhi, doing that. So that complicates things because, cool, Kinsey and Nina are aware of everything, but Tyler knows nothing about the keys, so he'll be like, oh, why Bodhi's acting weird, a little different, and it's like, oh, God. Plus, they already got to deal with, Gideon and his men. Interestingly enough, you know what crossed my mind was the moment Dodge got inside of Bodhi's body, there was almost a part of me that almost expected the line to be like, Bodhi to look around and go, let's play. Because it reminds me of, Once Upon a Time. Oh, spoilers for Once Upon a Time. This is like season 3 anyway. Henry gets possessed by a certain character, and it's just like, and the final line of the episode after he got possessed was, let's play. And I thought about that. So it kind of made me think of that, like, oh, like someone possessing your body, so on and so forth. So I'm like, oh man, it just sucks. That thing, I was like, I wasn't expecting that development. Like I said, I assumed the episode was going to end the moment Dodge was like, oh, thanks for the ride. And Bodhi was like, thought that was the end of the episode. Nope. Kept going just so things could get worse. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. When things can go wrong, they will go wrong, especially with the keys, Once again, it's just like the keys are screaming to be used, plus they kind of play into your desire because they give you what you want, all that power, but it comes at a price and a cost that maybe you're not quite sure what it is, and you never, and you might not be the only one who has to pay, so we'll have to wait and see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.